Welcome to episode 238 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, we're talking about 7 mental shifts and habits that you can make to get your grading under control. Visit truthforteachers.com to get an easy-to-read, easy-to-share blog post version of this podcast episode. And you'll get a sneak peek at our new Truth for Teachers Writers Collective that's launching soon. Teachers, if you're looking for engaging project-based lessons for students in grades K through 12, I encourage you to take a look at the PBL tools and resources on Defined Learning. Defined Learning provides an online library of engaging real-world projects, including inspiring career-focused videos, research resources, and more that will all help you create deeper learning opportunities for your students. Listeners of this podcast can get free 60-day access to all of Defined Learning's PBL resources simply by going to definedlearning.com/truth. That's definedlearning.com/truth. Before we jump into today's episode, can I ask a favor that I don't request very often on here? I would love for you to leave a review for the show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. You can click through to do it right from your podcast player app that you're using right now, and there's also a link in the show notes too. Every review left for Truth for Teachers helps boost visibility for the podcast, and that means more educators are able to discover it. Leaving a review is one of the fastest, easiest ways to support the show, and I am so appreciative of the folks who do so. Today's topic is about getting your grading under control. I'm talking with Megan Faherty. She is in her 17th year of teaching high school social studies, including world history, European history, and psychology. She's also the curriculum facilitator or department head for social studies at her school, and she's committed to helping her colleagues achieve sustainable work-life balance while also growing as teachers. Megan is a member of the Hour Teacher Workweek program, and she's a writer for the Truth for Teachers Collective. She has internalized so many strategies and mindset shifts from 40 Hour and incorporated her own ideas and research in order to do what feels impossible to many teachers, particularly those at the secondary level. She has completely transformed the way she approaches grading so that it's more meaningful for kids and less time-consuming for her to manage. That transformation really came from small shifts in the way she thinks about the way she assigns and grades work. So in her article for Truth for Teachers, she identifies 7 shifts that can help you get grading under control. This is going to be a game changer for some of you. I just know it. These are the practical strategies and different approaches to thinking about how you grade that can truly help you reclaim your nights and weekends like Megan has. So listen as she shares these 7 mental shifts, and we'll elaborate and share some additional tips as well. So the first one that you identified is if you don't have time to grade it, then students don't have time to learn from it. Tell us what you mean by that.
So this is really, to me, the core of shifting your whole approach to grading and the most important shift. And basically what I'm saying is to assign less work, which I know to a lot of teachers is a horrifying statement. Early in my career, people said that to me when I was stressed out about working so much. And it really sounded to me like people were telling me to be bad at my job, to give up student learning for the sake of my own time. But what I have realized since that time is, really grades are meant to be feedback for students. Students are supposed to get information about what they're doing well and what they need to improve on. And the goal here is to assign less work to enable me to give that feedback to students in a timely manner. This requires me to think about what is the purpose of this assignment. And if the purpose is for students to practice skills or knowledge and get feedback on it, they need that feedback before the assessment. If I don't have time to grade that assignment until 2 weeks after we finish the unit, then what did students learn from it? How were they able to take advantage of that practice? So to me, this is the most important shift because it enables us to understand that as a teacher, when I choose to grade less or make decisions about what to assign based on what I have time for, that doesn't make me a bad teacher. It actually enables me to be a better teacher because I am thinking about each assignment I give and what the purpose of it is, and how students can learn from it and actually get the feedback and learn from the feedback
So
before
you're
they are
basically
assigned.
doing quality over quantity and really focusing on what are the pieces that
Yes.
I can give good feedback on to actually help move students in their learning to where they need to be rather than, I just need to be keeping them constantly busy and grading every single thing.
Right, exactly. And, many times earlier in my career, I found myself grading an assignment weeks after an assessment and thinking, what's even the point of making these comments right now? And that really is the
Yes.
definition of busy work. If ultimately I'm grading it because I assigned it and because I feel the need to give them points for it,
Hmm.
that is not about learning anymore. So choosing what to assign based on my ability, whether I actually realistically have time to return the feedback in a meaningful time frame, does enable me to be a better teacher and to do more
So what do you
assessment
do with
for
the work that
learning.
you don't grade?
Well, generally, if I assign it, I am going to grade it. It's more about I'm making a decision when I'm thinking about whether to assign something about whether I'll have time to grade it. And if I think there's no way I'm going to have time to grade that and give them the feedback before the assessment, then I want to shift it from maybe homework to an activity in class where they're going to get real time feedback in class. Um, Another strategy, if I have assigned something and I think there's not time to grade it and give the students feedback, to do some kind of peer assessment or self assessment on it. Something that I do, I have students practice writing a lot in what I call writing drills, but I don't grade all of them. We do 5 or 6, and then they pick their best one, what they think is their best one,
Yes, I
and I
love
grade
that.
that one. So
Because that gives them
yeah.
accountability. That's always the piece that teachers are worried about, right? Like if I don't grade everything, then they're not going to do it. But if they know they have to produce enough good stuff to be able to submit something that they're proud of and that they feel like,
Hmm.
really represents their work and is going to give them the best possible grade, that encourages them to keep working. Do you find that?
Yes, absolutely. And with that particular writing drill activity, the students assess themselves on every single one that they do, and they can see how it helps them improve. So they're invested in the process. And the other thing, I mean, I definitely care about accountability and, if students are going to do the work or not. And generally, I just tell them, students will ask, will this be graded? And sometimes I tell them, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. If they know that all the work we do might be graded or might not, and that's just established, then they're kind of less obsessed with that question of
Yes,
will there
exactly.
be
So you don't
points
have
for
to
this?
say up front, I'm not grading this. This doesn't count. Say, well, I'll make a determination about that
Hmm.
afterwards. We haven't decided that, so I love that.
Right. And it counts for learning whether or not it counts for
That's always
points.
the key. Great. Okay, so that first mental shift around
Yes.
grading is if you don't have time to grade it, students don't have time to learn from it. So we're giving fewer assignments and we're really thinking
Hmm.
about am I going to be able to give students meaningful feedback on this? Otherwise, maybe I don't want to assign it or I don't want to assign it in that way. Your second shift is to put grading on your
Right.
to-do list when you assign it. What do you mean by that?
So I used to procrastinate everything, and I would make a to do list of what I had to grade when there was some kind of deadline coming up. And I would have stacks of folders of papers to grade and go through them and make a list of all the items that are there. And I finally realized every time I give an assignment, I'm creating work for
Yes.
my future self. And if if I don't write it down, then I'm continuously in this cycle of creating work for my future self that then I'm not consciously aware of, and I give more assignments, forgetting there's 5 assignments that are just hanging out there, waiting for me to collect them. So, it really made a difference in terms of me being realistically aware of how much grading I have to do when I started putting stuff on my to-do list when I assign it, when I create the assignment. So then the next week, there's this essay coming in on Friday. And on Monday, I'm thinking about whether to give another homework assignment. And I'm realizing, that might be due Thursday. And I'm realizing, I have those essays coming in. Instead of giving it a homework assignment, I'm going to shift this to an in-class activity. So that was a pretty easy one, but it really made a big difference in my planning. And this is what enables me to do number one, to think about whether I have time to grade something when I'm deciding whether to assign it. If I don't have an up-to-date list, I can't even
I see how number
answer
one
that
and number
question.
two fit together. And I have to say, that's a big aha for me because I've never actually thought about grading like that. I've thought about blocking off time periods for grading. So, Tuesday afternoon from 3 to 4 or something like that. But this idea of actually writing down the actual assignments really would make me be so much more intentional about how much time is going to be needed, which is one thing, right? Because it can be hard to estimate. You think an hour is going to be enough, and then you realize, no, I need like 2. If you're writing down the actual
Oh, yeah.
assignments that you have to grade, you're going to know how long it's going to take, and it's going to make you think twice about, as you said, creating additional work for your future self.
Absolutely. And also
Right.
creating the work for your students, because this has the added benefit of making me think about what else have I
Yeah.
given students to do before
Yeah,
I
and I
give
think that's
a
so
new
important,
assignment.
especially when we talk about student motivation and engagement. It's so easy to complain these kids don't want to do anything, or they're lazy, or they don't want to work. Hello, I would not want to be them. I would not want to spend 6 hours a day sitting there and teachers feeling like they have to keep me busy every single second, and I'm constantly working and there's hardly any downtime.
Right.
Like it would be, I would imagine students put in so much more effort when you're actually giving them less. But that requires intentionality. You have to really analyze what matters, what
Yes.
moves the needle for kids, and do those things instead of just trying to cram everything in. But I think you're such a great example of what
Right.
happens when a teacher actually makes that time, because it's less stressful for you, it's less work for you, and you're channeling kids' limited ability to focus. They have a limited amount of time in the day when they can sit
Mm-hmm.
still, concentrate, and do work. You want to really channel that limited energy instead of complaining they should be able to do it for 6 hours straight. I can't do it 6 hours straight. Let's channel that limited attention span and
Yeah.
focus and engagement time into something that is really going to make a difference for them. And I think you have nailed down a really practical way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I teach high school students. They're not only dealing with 6 or 7 different classes, they have jobs, they have sports, they're involved in so many activities, and they deserve to
That's
be
right.
able to enjoy those things as well. And I will get I want a smaller amount of work that is high quality. Again, it's about
Yes, yes,
quality over
because we want to
quantity.
protect kids' time too. It's so important. Like, we are not
Yes.
the owners of their weekends and evenings. I mean, we're not even the owners of their time during the day. Just like, school districts don't own teachers' time. We're still individual human beings. And the more agency
Yeah,
and autonomy people have, like, the goal is not to make kids work as hard as possible. I don't want anybody working as hard as possible. I want people to enjoy their lives, live
right.
meaningful, fulfilling, purposeful lives. And that does not mean working nonstop all the time. And so, what a model that is for your students to be like, we're going to focus on what's really important instead of trying to do all the things.
Mhm.
Okay, this is so good. All right, your
Absolutely.
third mental shift is to grade the way that works. What does that look like for you?
So, this is about self-awareness and really the same kind of metacognition that we want to teach our students. We talk about wanting to personalize learning for students and help them learn what is their best way to study, what strategies work for them. And this is the same thing for me as a teacher. So this really started with I always assigned this project in my AP psychology class that resulted in these long papers. And I would get, if I had 2 sections, I would have 60 10 to 15 page papers turned in. And I always thought, okay, the reasonable way to tackle this is to grade 3 papers a day. That's very reasonable. And I'll be done in 20 days. No problem. Well, I just never graded 3 papers a day. That, that just, there was
Yep.
always something more urgent to do. I could always justify putting off grading the projects. And meanwhile, students are asking me, oh, when are those development projects going to be graded? Oh, yeah, I'm about halfway through them. So maybe next week. So then eventually, maybe 2 months after they were due, I would finally sit down one weekend and just divide them into stacks of 5 each, grade 5, go wash the dishes. Grade 5, make a phone call, take a little break in between each stack of 5. Spend the whole weekend doing it, and I would be done. And this is 2 months later, and this entire time I've been feeling guilty and overwhelmed about how I'm procrastinating grading these projects. So I described this problem to someone who's very, very wise, and they said, seems like you have a great strategy to grade these things in one weekend. Why are you beating yourself up about this? Just do it that way. And I don't know why I needed somebody else to show me that, to break me out of my rut, that the entire time I was procrastinating grading these projects, I could have just done the weekend right away. That's what worked for me, and had them done a week after they were due. And I just needed to accept that this whole 3 projects a day strategy was never going to work for me. Now, I know teachers who can grade that way, who do that with essays, and it works great for them, but it didn't work for me. So that's what this is about, that self-awareness. Over time, I've learned that when I have a big thing to grade like that, dividing it into sets of 5 and taking a little break between each set of 5 really works well for me. And doing it all in one chunk. So that usually means on a weekend, because I'm not going to have that uninterrupted chunk of time.
Can I ask, how many hours a week are you working in general during the year, and how much time are you spending on grading?
In a normal year, not a pandemic year, I would say that in the non-busy times of the year, I'm working 40 to 45 hours a week. So that's not the first couple weeks of the school year, and that's not the end of the semester or the start of a new semester when I might be starting with brand new classes. Those are busier times. But most of the time, 40 to 45 hours. I have mentioned weekends a lot, and that is because I have discovered I'm just so much more efficient on a weekend morning than a weeknight. So I generally don't do schoolwork on weeknights. I don't bring work home from me. When I leave the building, I'm done for the day. And then on a typical weekend, I might spend 2 or 3 hours on a weekend morning. More if I have a large thing to grade, because I know that's what works for me. But even with those weekend hours, generally when I add it up, I'm around 40 to 45, which I'm very satisfied with. That is a number of hours that is a sustainable workload. I can stick with this career at that level.
And that's really what the goal is. I mean, a lot of times, I actually just heard from someone who just joined the 40-hour teacher workweek the other day, and she was saying, there's a lot of people who are working like 40 to 45 hours, like that time frame has been coming up. And she's like, I'm wondering, is it possible to even work contractual hours? If you're working an extra 5 hours unpaid, you're still hovering right around that 40-something mark. And I think even more important than a goal of like not working any hours unpaid, that's a fantastic goal. With the way the systems are set up now, it's not necessarily a realistic goal for a lot of teachers. And so what I just like to think about what you're saying here is this sustainable? Does this make the job fit into my life, or does my whole life have to revolve around this job? And when you're in the 40 to 45 hour range, that's a normal work week for a typical American, in 2021. Like that's reasonable. It's doable. It gives you, ideally 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for doing everything else each day.
Yeah, absolutely. At this level, I am not sacrificing things that I want to do in my personal life because I have to work. And I am not working during my vacations. I make choices about what hours I work in a way that works for me and enables me to do my job as a professional. And, I think about there's other professions where a friend's husband is an accountant. Yeah. He has a busy season in January where he works super long hours. And he is a salaried worker, and that's part of his responsibility, and that's what he does. So, I'm a salaried professional, and there's certain times of year I work more. That's my busy season. The rest of the time, I want to work a reasonable amount of hours and be able to make the choices I want to make for my personal time. I've also learned I don't even try to grade on weeknights anymore because I am not efficient. I am so worn out, cognitively worn out, that grading on weeknights for me is just like slow torture. And I have learned that I could take 2 hours grading something on a weeknight, and I could grade that same thing in an hour if I just did it on Saturday or Sunday morning instead. So I know that's what works for me. I can be a lot more efficient. And the way I know that is because I actually do time how long it takes me to grade certain items, so that I can be realistic about my plan. You know, like you said earlier, you might think something will take an hour and then it takes 3 hours. Well, I need to know that if I'm going to be realistic about what I have time to grade. So I know certain things. I know history essays are 6 minutes an essay, and I know 2 sections of AP Psych tests is 3 hours, so that I can actually be realistic about how much I can grade in a
That
certain
level
time
of
period.
self-awareness is so important to know, like, weeknights, I'm spent, it's just not going to happen. Learning that about yourself, I think, is so important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because sometimes when I force myself to do something, I was like, you know what, if I wait and do this tomorrow when I'm fresh, it's going to take half the time and it's going to be twice
Mm-hmm.
as good. If I try to push through instead of like
Right.
honoring my body and my brain, which are saying, stop, rest, do not do this tonight, take a break, come back
Yeah.
to it. I know you just want to knock it off, you know, get it off your plate, cross it off the to-do list. But just if you wait until a better time, you know, maybe it's a time of day, a time of week, you know, may even be a time of month, depending on
Mm-hmm.
what other, you know, commitments and things you have in your schedule, where you know you can devote more time to things. And understanding that about yourself, I think, is so important. So, your fourth shift is to reduce guilt by being honest about your grading timeline. So, we're going to continue with this theme of talking about letting go of shoulds, letting go of guilt about how you think you should be doing things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Um, so, what I often find for myself and my colleagues and friends who are teachers is that we are not only stressed about the actual work we have to do and while doing the work, but even when not working, we are weighed down by guilt and stress about the fact that
Mhm.
we are not currently working. There's, you know, that backpack that we brought home with all the papers to grade, and it's like it's staring at us even when we are taking time out for our family or making dinner or whatever it is. And I mean, that's just wasted time and emotional energy to be feeling guilty when you're not working, right? So I have found that being honest with my students and my colleagues and myself about what my realistic grading timeline is eliminates that guilt, because I am not procrastinating. I have decided I will grade
Yes.
those essays on Saturday, or I will grade that late work on Thursday. So there is no reason to feel guilty about not doing it now. I know when I'm going to do it, and that is not procrastination. That is a decision I actually made. And I know I have a system, and I know that that system works for me. This really started because I had a graduate school class where the professor was constantly promising to update our grades and never did. And it was so frustrating. It was so infuriating. And I realized this is what
Mm.
I've been doing to my students. Because, like I said about that psychology project, I was always promising I was almost done grading it when I hadn't even started. I definitely was lying to my students. So, first, I just started being more honest
Mhm.
because I knew it was annoying when I promised something would be graded and it wasn't. And then I discovered these really amazing benefits to it beyond just being a more honest person, that I didn't feel guilty about not grading when I wasn't grading. I also really like that it makes our work as teachers
Yes,
visible to students. So when I say to them, okay, those tests take me about 3 hours to grade, so I'm going to do them Sunday morning,
that's right.
you know, they have no idea. They have no idea how long it takes to grade things. So often students come back an hour after they took a test to ask if it was graded. What did you think I was doing between then and now? I was teaching. But they just have no clue, right? So this honesty really makes the work more visible to them. And then I find when I'm honest with colleagues about my grading timeline, it reduces that tendency when you work on a team and everybody, you know, has the same assignment to grade, that tendency to compare. Ooh, that person already returned the test and I haven't started grading mine. You know, they're a better teacher than me. That type of comparison, which is just
Hmm.
not helpful in any way. If I just know what my system is and I say, okay, well, I'm grading those on Thursday, then I don't have to feel guilty or that sense of comparison. And when I'm honest with myself about it, what it means is when I have free time, it's actual free time. It's not time where I sit and feel guilty that I'm not working, because I've decided I know when I'm going to do the work. And this time that I've chosen not to work, I can totally let go of that and just
Yes, because it's
actually
such
be
torture
relaxed.
when you feel like you should be doing something. It's the worst. Like you gave the example of
Mm-hmm.
the project that, you were sort of beating yourself up about not grading. Turns out you could just do it in a weekend and that way it worked better for you. But all of those evenings where it was like you could not totally relax because it was hanging over your head. It wasn't hanging over your head because it wasn't done. It was hanging over your head because you hadn't found a time that you'd set aside to do it. So that was going to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, love this part about reducing guilt by
Right.
being honest about your grading timeline. The next mental shift to reduce your grading stress that you've identified is to plan backwards from a goal.
Yeah. So this is like backwards design kind of, but for grading. And this is the first out of all of the changes that I've listed in the article. This is the first one I actually did, because I had this radical idea several years ago that I wanted my winter break to be free of
It is
grading. And
radical.
that
Yeah.
that in
Sadly, it
itself
is
was
radical.
yeah. At the time, it was completely radical, because up until then, I had really viewed my vacations, winter break and spring break, as wonderful opportunities to catch up on work. I literally planned to
Mm,
spend my vacations working. I can't go on a trip because I need to catch up on grading. And now I think, just how was I taught that that's how I should use
mm,
my vacation time? It's insane to me now. Anyway, so once I decided, I think it would be great if I had no grading to do over winter break. How am I going to make this happen? So, um, I made a list of everything that would need to be graded, stuff that had already been turned in, and anything that would be turned in up until that break. Then I number them in the order I'm going to grade them in, and then I plug them into the days that I have. So, starting with the last day before the break, the last item on the list goes on that day, and then working backwards. I usually try to give myself a cushion day in the middle where I haven't put too much grading on there in case I get behind, so I can try to keep up. And I still do this. I have a much more organized system, to-do list system, and planning system, as I've been talking about. But I still do use this system before breaks, oftentimes for the end of a semester. It's good for if you have parent conferences coming up, so you need everything up to date, or even something like a personal goal, like I'm going to be out of town that weekend. I really want to make sure I'm caught up on everything before then. So anytime where there's a specific deadline. And the reason it works is that, one, I'm always very motivated by my goal. The goal of having a vacation that is free from work is a
mhm.
very motivating goal. Um, Two, and this is, I think, the biggest thing, I've already
Yes.
made all the decisions. So I've decided what I'm grading next, and I said what day I'm grading it. So if it's Tuesday night, I'm not, oh, what should I grade right now? Or, do I need to do
Yes,
another assignment
exactly.
right now
Am
or
I
not?
done? That's the other question. Like, okay, I finished it. Can I
Yeah.
relax or should I
Yes,
not relax? Because there's still more to do. But if you have it on that list, I'm only doing this assignment
exactly.
today, that other one's tomorrow. I'm on track. I can stop guilt free.
Exactly. Exactly. I am not tackling the
Yes.
entire list at once. I am tackling today's list. And as long as I stay on track, yes, I can stop for the
Hmm.
night. I'm done. So, and then I also plan to enable it. So, using some of the other strategies I've talked about, like I try to avoid having a large test or project due the
Hmm.
day before a break, um, so that I don't have, something huge hanging over my head for a break or
Hmm.
whatever the deadline is that I
I'm
set.
very goal oriented in that way too. Because like I'll look at the list and I'll be like, oh, I don't want to do this thing. But I'm like, Angela, if you don't do this thing, you're going to do twice as much tomorrow, and it's going to be like a line of dominoes. And that really keeps me motivated because I
Yes.
create those little it's sort of like sprints for myself, basically, where it's like, okay, I'm just going to like really work, focused on this for the next couple of days. And I know the other things that I want to do. It's like, I'm ready to move on from this because I have, these games that I want to create, or there's something around my house that I want to do, or, there's a break coming up, or, there's some event coming up on the weekend and I want to make sure I can totally focus on that thing. So thinking like, okay, I got to press through this to-do list because otherwise I'm not going to be able to do these other things. And it's going to push back all my other goals. I know that doesn't motivate everyone. Some people just get overwhelmed and give up, but it sounds like for our personality types, it works really well.
Yeah, the first time I did this,
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked at how well it worked because exactly like you said, I found myself sitting here in my workspace. I don't want to grade this right now. And then thinking, okay, but if I do, then I am on track for this goal that I really care about. So I'm just going to push through and do it. And there is an end. I only have to do this one more thing tonight to stick to the plan. So I just find it works really well for me before breaks and end of the grading.
And I noticed
you
said you started planning like a week before. So like the week before the winter break is like when you start deciding. And I found that's really helpful for me too, because like, let's say I have a vacation coming up in 6 weeks. Well, if I try to plan out my tasks for that length of time, I can easily skip and say, it doesn't matter. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll push this thing back. It has to be something much more short term. For me, usually it's something on the weekend. It's like, I really don't want to have to go on the computer if I can help it on Saturday and Sunday. Because if it's too far away, if it's more than really 4, 5, 6 days away, a lot of times I'll tell myself it's okay to procrastinate. And
it's hard to sustain that level of focus and motivation much longer. And also the reason it works is I think because the goal is motivating and a very distant goal is not as motivating as a more short term.
All right, we have 2 more shifts left that we're going to talk about that will help reduce stress around grading and make it more effective and efficient. And the next one that you'd identified was to do the worst thing first.
So overall, I am a huge procrastinator, whether it's work or cleaning or chores or whatever, filing my taxes. And this is my overall strategy for stopping myself from procrastinating. Figure out what is the one thing I am most dreading doing and do it right away. So in terms of grading, and this goes along with the strategy that I just talked about making that list ahead of a deadline. Once I have made the list, number 1, 2, and 3 on the list, the first 3 things I'm going to grade are whatever on that list I think is going to be most difficult to grade, whether it's going to take the most time, or I think it's going to be difficult to grade maybe because it's more subjective, the grading, so it'll take a long time, or maybe it's something that I think students will have struggled with, and so for that reason, it's going to take longer to grade. What I find is when there is something I've been dreading and putting off grading, when I finally sit down to grade it, I often find, this isn't so bad. This is going more quickly than I thought, or the students did better than I thought. And then if I have a long list of items to grade, the level of accomplishment and freedom and relief I feel when I get that one thing that I have been dreading done is really incredible. And then that fuels me to grade the rest of the list. Everything else on the list seems easy by comparison. So when I get that worst thing out of the way first, then my need to procrastinate really fades away.
I find the same thing. Sometimes I do a couple easy tasks just to get myself started, like if I just can't bring myself to do it. But doing the hardest thing first really works. And sometimes I even have to, this is almost embarrassing to admit because it's like treating myself like such a toddler, but like sometimes I will have to say, okay, I don't want to do this thing. Let me just open up the tab for it on my computer. Let me just like have that document open. And, I'm also going to need to reference this thing. Let me open up that tab too. And, actually, I think I could just do this one part right here at the top. I don't know if I can get through this whole thing. Let me just do this one part and kind of ease myself into it. And then the next thing I know, I'm on a roll because you're right. Once you start doing the hardest thing and you realize most of the time it's actually not that bad. and that inspires you to keep going. And I feel like
Right.
when it actually is that bad, it's because I haven't made important decisions. And I think that's what we're going to talk about next is about
Mhm.
decision fatigue, and when you're wasting too much time going back and forth about things that maybe don't matter. So let's talk about that next shift, because I feel like that ties in a lot for me.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I've talked to colleagues where they say, I just spend so much time deciding, is this 4 points out of 5 or 5 points out of 5? And so this last shift, in a way, it's different from all the others because all of the others are around decisions about what to grade and when to grade. And this one is about once you actually sit down to do it, how can you be more efficient and spend less time actually sitting with that stack of papers? Um, so yeah, the decision fatigue, and for me, that dithering over points. And I mean, I could spend a couple
Right.
minutes pondering half a point on an assignment. That's not really a
Hmm.
great use of my time as a professional. So, like the rest of this, this is a case where what's good for me as a teacher is also good for the students. If I reduce my wiggle room on assigning points and the number of decisions I have to make while grading, I am spending my time more efficiently, and I'm also grading
Mm.
more consistently for students because if I have fewer decisions to make, if I have fewer choices for how many points to give the students, it means I'm being more consistent in how I grade the first student in the pile all the way through the last student in the pile because there's fewer choices or less subjectivity. So I have a bunch of strategies that I use in order to do this. Making my rubrics have clear thresholds. So I like to avoid rubric language like somewhat
Hmm.
typically,
It is.
mostly. That's very subjective. And as much as possible, I try to make the rubric levels more objective, maybe with a number, maybe with something like students correctly interpreted 3 of the 6 primary sources. And even if it can't have a number in it, the idea of a threshold is if the student achieved that, if their thesis statement is analytical, for example, then I'm not going to spend time worrying about if I agree with their thesis or if there's a better way they could have phrased it or if they had a different argument from what all the other students did. Is it analytical? Yes. That's the threshold. Done. They get the point. So, really making the rubric thresholds as clear as possible so I don't have to spend time interpreting or, my own rubric. Similarly, if I reduce the number of levels on the rubric or the number of points
Hmm.
each item is worth, that reduces the decisions I have. So if one item on an assignment is worth 4 points and I'm giving half points, I am choosing
Right.
from 9 different levels, 0 through 4. If I make that same item worth 1 point, then they get 0 or partial, half credit, or 1. There's only 3 choices. And so, again, not only am I going to grade it quicker because I have fewer options to choose from, but I can be a lot more confident that I'm assessing the students all in the exact same way from the beginning
That's
to
a
the
big
end of
concern
a big
because
pile.
we tend to grade, the first paper differently than than the last paper, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
documented phenomenon. I mean, they've even found judges in courts tend to, the earlier cases in the day, you are
Oh,
much more likely to get off with a lighter sentence, whereas later in the day they tend to be overly harsh. Because they've seen so many cases, they're getting
that makes
like they're
perfect sense
tired,
to
like
me.
everything. They're just fed up with everything. It's like no, and they come down way too hard. Do you notice that in your grading that you're easier on the first few or easier in the beginning or
I think it kind of depends on the type of assignment I'm grading and what I expect and how the first paper
Mhm.
matches my expectation. So if the first paper is a lot below my expectation, I find myself grading it really harshly. And then if I keep going through the stack and I realize, oh, this is where most of the students are, I need to adjust my expectation. They're not understanding it. And
Mhm.
then I get
Mhm.
easier on them once I realize it's not just, one student. So I do think it depends on the situation, but I know that my grading, the way I apply the points can shift a lot throughout one class set, especially if I don't grade them all at one time. If I start them on Monday and finish them on Wednesday.
You might be paying much more attention one day. You might be really focused and noticing all the little things, and the next day you're distracted and you kind of overlook something that maybe you would have marked down for someone else.
Mm-hmm. Or in between, I retaught something. And so when I go back to grade the second half of the papers, unconsciously, I am expecting them to know the thing I retaught, that they didn't get that before they turned in the assignment. There's so many factors. So, anything I can do to make sure that I can apply my grading as objectively as possible, as consistently as possible for all the students. Obviously, it's very good for them. They also understand the feedback more when there's fewer choices. If they're trying to understand, why did I get half instead of 1? They can understand that a lot better than trying to figure out, well, why did I get 2.5 instead of 3 out of 10? That's very opaque to them. So this has benefits in terms of my workload, and it has huge benefits.
I would imagine it also results in fewer parent emails or students saying, why did I get this grade? It should have been this. When you talk about investing time into really tightening up your rubrics and being really clear about what you're grading for, on a 3-point rubric, it's much harder to make an argument that you were graded unfairly than on a 6-point or 9-point rubric.
Yes, absolutely. The students, they can clearly see, I did not have that thing. And they really understand the feedback they're getting a lot better.
What's something that you wish every teacher understood about shifting their mindset around grading?
So there's 2 things. One of them is just to reiterate something I've said a couple times, which is this is both good for teachers and good for students.
Yes.
That making choices about grading in order to reduce my own workload does not make me a bad teacher. It enables me to assign work and assess it more deliberately, more consciously, and in a way that's better for student learning. So this is not about me sacrificing student learning because I want free time. It's a win-win. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is that these are all choices I make myself. I don't need an administrator to lighten my workload for me in this way. I can make these decisions, or my team and I can make these choices about how we grade together. And I don't need to wait for somebody else to fix this problem for me. It's within my control.